Welcome to Butterflies of Wisdom, everyone. This morning with me, I have Peter. And so without further ado, I'm going to get Peter to take it away and explain his background.
Well, I was a psychotherapist and marriage counselor here in New York for 30 years. And I noticed that I've been doing this kind of work for a long time. Right now I've switched over to being a life coach because I thought I could more efficiently impart what it is I learn as to why people are unhappy. Because in the end, the problem is the same. People are unhappy. That's why they seek counseling. Anyway, it occurred to me that maybe there was a psychological common denominator without which people could not be unhappy. And happily I discovered there was. And that's what led me to write my book and also led me to become a life coach, because I thought by becoming a life coach I could be more efficiently impart what it is I learn as to why people really become unhappy.
So, okay, you switched over from being a counselor to a life coach only because you were sick of being a counselor and doing that 9 to 5 grind, or you wanted to figure out what makes people tick, or you wanted to get to the bottom of why people were so unhappy in coming to you?
Well, yes. Well, no, it works out like this. There seems to be an underlying sameness to what people were presenting, all kinds of individual complaints. But in the end, it occurred to me quite obviously, I'm in the unhappiness business in the same way that a physician is in the illness business. So I started to think about the possibility that there may be a sort of psychological common denominator without which people could not be unhappy. And I discovered there was. If you were to ask anyone, well, why are you unhappy, they would invariably say that they're feeling bad. And if you were to pursue that question further, what do you mean by feeling bad? They would say, I'm feeling in a way that I don't want to feel. And so I said, well, let me think about that. And I thought about it very, very hard for a long time. And so I said so it would be more efficient for me when a person comes in, regardless of the complaint, if I know what they're really doing to themselves and make themselves unhappy, I could address that immediately. I could save an awful lot of time and expense and suffering, you see. That sounds like a rather extravagant claim, but I assure you it's not. I mean, I spent a lot of time on the subject.
Well, I believe you. So basically, people would come to you and not get to the root of their problem of why they're unhappy. Let's say they have problems at work, and people would come to you and say, I don't feel very good, I'm unhappy, fix me, basically.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're unhappy and they're coming to you. However they, stipulate the complaint, I mean, it could be a marital problem, it could be a personal problem, it could be, the number of complaints are uncountable. So I said, wait a minute, what are these people doing to themselves? I said, is there something they're all doing in their heads that makes them unhappy? And it really comes down to things. I mean, you've heard the expression endlessly that people, I don't think you've ever heard of a psychological problem where low self-esteem isn't at issue, right? In other words, a person that doesn't like themselves, they're putting themselves down, regardless of the complaint, whatever they're pointing to, that's what they're saying. So it's really a problem of disesteem. Now, if you were to look at this question of disesteem, well, what does that mean? Well, it means people believe that there's something about them that's not right. They think they're bad. They're not smart enough, intelligent enough, or attractive enough, or competent enough, or something like that. So unhappiness is really equivalent to being to an act of self-condemnation. They put themselves down. They believe that they are bad. And my job is to help them find out why they do that.
So what you're saying is when people come to a counselor or a therapist and a life coach and say, I don't feel very good, it's more self-image than anything else.
Well, yeah, but they're all saying the same thing, right? In other words, if a person, let's put it this way, if a person thought highly of themselves, or if they didn't have any negative feelings about themselves, would they need my services?
No.
See what I'm saying?
The person thought highly of themselves.
Yeah, no, I mean,
They would
the
need,
specific complaint, what they call the presenting complaint may be different. There's any number of complaints people make. But what they don't realize is that in the end, they're complaining about themselves.
yeah, and
And so if
making
that's
people
the
around
problem,
them jump on their ship. I'm sorry, but they're making people around them jump on their ship because they want a pity party.
perhaps right, yes, you know. So the idea is that, so what I do is I steer them to taking a look and saying, okay, let's see why you're putting yourself down, right? And if I can eliminate that, show them what they're doing and why they don't have to do it, well, then I would have accomplished my, you know, done what I'm supposed to do, and they would have gotten what they want, what they came for.
Well, I have a question for you then.
Sure.
What has been your biggest success in all this?
I don't have a very good connection, Danielle. Would you repeat that, please?
What has been your biggest success in all this?
Well, my biggest success has been that I wrote a book about it. In other words, it's a very unusual book because it addresses unhappiness. It's not usually a book on happiness, but it addresses the subject of unhappiness. Now, I think it might be, there are thousands of books out there on Amazon with the word happiness in it. But you'd be hard put to find any books dealing explicitly with the subject of unhappiness, the very problem these books are designed to remediate. So I said, well, so my biggest success, I think I wrote a definitive work on the nature of unhappiness, how it happens, what it's all about, what goes on in people's heads. And the book itself has to do with the fact that, well, what people think that's bothering them is not what's really going on. In effect, it works like this. They're looking in a mirror, and they don't like what they see. Now, if you can change that, you will have changed your emotional life.
I understand. So you are trying to get to the root of why people are so unhappy.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so here's how I thought it out. I hope you have enough time. Maybe I can give you a specific example of how this works. This works. Okay.
You can.
Let's take something like jealousy, which is, I think you would agree, a very unhappy state of mind. It's a negative emotion. Agreed? People who experience jealousy, it's a very unpleasant state of mind. So let me break it down how that would work. Okay. And let me do it by creating a situation in which such an emotion might arise. All right. A woman is at a party. She notices her husband talking to this very attractive woman, and she experiences a knot in her stomach, the so-called gut reaction, that informs her that she's become jealous. Now, if you were to ask her, well, how did you become jealous? She would probably say something like this, well, had my husband not been talking to this very attractive woman, I would not have become jealous. So in her mind, the sequence of events would be as follows. What happened out there in the external world, which is the husband talking to the attractive woman, created a gut reaction, and that informs her in her head that she's become jealous. Now, that's how most people would experience it, but is that how it really happens? So let me tell you how it really happens. Okay. Now, what happens in order for a woman to become jealous? The first thing she has to do is to compare herself to somebody who she thinks is her superior, someone who she thinks is more intelligent, more vivacious, more attractive, something like that. But even before that, she had to do something else. She had to believe that she herself was less than attractive, that she herself was, in a word, bad. Now, the belief that she is bad predisposes her to see, not to observe things, but to perceive things. Now, we've all heard that perception is reality. So what she's doing is she's perceiving her husband talking to this very attractive woman, but that is being filtered to how she sees herself. And so the mistake she makes, as most people do, they think the event out there caused them to become jealous, when in point of fact, what caused her to become jealous, what caused her to feel bad, was the belief that she was bad. There's a fallacy in philosophy that runs like this. It's called a post hoc fallacy. In other words, after this, therefore because of this. After my husband was talking to this very attractive woman, I became jealous. Therefore, he caused my jealousy. When in point of fact, what caused her to become jealous, what caused her to feel bad was the belief that she was bad. Big difference. So now what happens, so now the first thing we have to get her to understand is, well, no, what he did, but what you did to yourself is something you already brought to the table. You didn't believe you were all that attractive to begin with, and that's what you have to change. Let me go a little further with that. In order to say, well, maybe that's just jealousy, but no. Suppose it turns out that this belief that we are bad is the indispensable requirement for all our emotional states. Maybe I can demonstrate it this way. Let's go back to the party. Now, we know the jealous lady believes she's bad. So when she focuses on the attractive other lady, she experiences jealousy. But given that same mindset, given that same belief, all she'd have to do to produce another emotion is to switch her focus. Suppose she decides to focus on her husband, in which case now she will experience resentment. And suppose she refocuses again on what people may be thinking about her husband talking to this very attractive woman. And then she will experience humiliation. Now you notice, 3 separately named negative emotions, 3 separate unhappy states of mind, but only the focus changed, not the cause. The cause was of her unhappiness was the belief that she was not good enough, that she was bad. Now here's the interesting question. Suppose it turns out that all our negative emotions are created that way. In other words, you first have to believe there's something about you that's not quite right, and then you view the world. And so the world merely proves what you already believe about yourself. Now that would be quite a radical transformation as to how we view emotions, right?
Yeah.
So then let's address all our energy and all our time on that one indispensable requirement. Okay, so the lady believes that she's bad, which is what most people do without even knowing it. And so we have to change that. So how do you change it? Well, the way to change it, you have to become an expert on how we come to believe it, right? If it's true, I think, would you agree, for example, could you really feel bad unless you really believed you were bad? What do you think, Danielle?
I'm going to give you the honest answer. Could you really feel bad unless you thought you were bad? No, unless you did something physically to someone that really made you feel bad. No, you couldn't necessarily feel bad and have a bad self-image about yourself. I mean, you can't.
Yeah, well, but what they bring to the table is a bad self-image. If somebody calls you bad, you only feel bad because the tendency is to believe that maybe they're right. If you knew with absolute certainty that what they were saying was wrong, it wasn't correct at all, you wouldn't have any response. Now, you heard the expression, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words cannot harm me? Well, that happens to be literally true, but nobody seems to believe it. And the reason why is because a stone breaks a bone. I mean, that's biology. But a word is not a stone. A word has to be interpreted by someone. And the interpretation, the responsibility of the interpretation is you, not them. And you see, and you can see how this kind of idea is spread throughout the culture. For example, political correctness doesn't understand that. Political correctness believes that words in and of themselves cause you to feel bad. And they don't understand that the meaning of a word is determined by the psychological context within which it is used, which means what is the intention of the user and what is the receptivity of the listener. In other words, it would be like this. Suppose somebody called you a terrorist. Would you feel bad?
If they called me a terrorist, of course I would.
Of course, they can condemn you and they can say all manner of things about you. But if you don't believe them, you have no problem.
Crazy than feeling bad, but
yeah, you would just think they were crazy, right?
Yes.
Of course, but here's the point. So but if that's so, then here's what happens. So when somebody puts you down or condemns you for how you look, how you think, whatever, Well, then when you respond, you're responding because somewhere, somehow, in the recesses of your own brain, you suspect maybe that's true. And that's why we respond unfavorably. But once you're convinced that what they're saying about you is completely crazy, completely false, you don't respond. So the solution to the problem is not to wash this guy's out and this person's mouth with soap. Is to say, wait a minute, what is there about me that I have to take a look at that I seem to have to apologize for?
Yeah.
See what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
you need,
Go ahead.
people need to look inside, people need to look inside themselves. And instead of using sticks and stones can break my bones and words will never hurt me, people need to look inside themselves and get to the root of their own problems. I'm sorry, but they do.
Right, but you see, so the solution to the problem is not to wash his mouth out with soap. The solution to the problem is, well, okay, what is there about you that you suspect might be true about what he's saying? And so in order for you to become free, in order to become a self-accepting human being, that's the kind of work I do. I get them to understand what they do to themselves, why they do it, and help and change that. So people have to stop believing that there's something about them that's not quite right. It goes under the heading of disesteem, right? What is disesteem? But a belief that there's something about you that's not quite right.
Yeah,
Now,
disesteem.
right? Isn't that what it is? So how do you get disesteemed? Well, you have to. It's a question of what you're believing about yourself. Now, with the example I gave you earlier, you know perfectly well you're not a terrorist. So if this person is saying that to you, he's obviously crazy. There's something wrong with that other person.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with me because I know I'm not a terrorist, right? But on the other hand, suppose they allude to your intelligence. Now, most people, unfortunately, have some question as to their intelligence. Most people have a question as to how they look, what they should know. And so those self-doubts is what sets them up for them to get hurt by somebody. So we have to remove those self-doubts. I mean, for example, let's take a question of how people look. Think about how many billions of dollars are spent every year on improving one's face.
Yes.
So you can see how a pandemic this is. I mean, the fact is, there are people who are very beautiful. Okay, we agree with that. But that doesn't mean we who are less beautiful have to apologize for who we are. We are born the way we are born. I mean, if you want to use a religious figure, are we not all children of God?
Well, we're all children of a higher power, but we're all children of God. But
Yeah. However you
see
characterize it, yeah, children of God, children of a higher power. But what I'm saying is that you were born the way you were born. Should we have to apologize for that?
No, not necessarily.
Right. So if you're at peace with yourself, who can get to you?
No one.
Wonderful. But you notice most people are not at peace with themselves. To put it another way, most people are generally unhappy about themselves. And so that seems to be the universal problem.
Wait a minute. Most people who are able-bodied are not happy with themselves?
Well, I'll put it this way. People who come to people like me, by definition, would have to be unhappy, wouldn't they?
Yes, but
So,
also, yes, but also it could have been a trauma that happened in their lives to make them feel unworthy.
I didn't follow that. I'm having a little problem hearing you. So would you say that again, Danielle, please?
It could have been a trauma in their lives to make them feel unesteemed and make them feel bad about themselves.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that if the other person does that, here's what happens. And it's on an unconscious level, you know. You say, wait a minute, their desire is to put you down to make you feel bad, right? Now the question is, why do you accommodate them? And
I see what you're saying. Why do you accommodate the person who's who's making you feel bad.
Who wants you to feel bad, but they can't make you to feel bad without your support. It doesn't seem that way at the time. It seems the way he said this, I felt that, like stimulus response, but that's an illusion. What happens is, because in other words, what we talked about earlier, if they condemned you for being a terrorist, you would say you're ridiculous. You wouldn't feel bad. This person's crazy. On the other hand, if they said something about your appearance, your intelligence, your behavior, and most people have sensitivities along those lines, you start taking it seriously because you already doubted yourself to begin with. And so how do I help them? Well, I help remove their self-doubt so that somehow once they are at peace with themselves, people can't get to them.
So you make people feel at peace with themselves.
Yes. To put it another way, to remove their disesteem. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
If you think about it, all of psychology, in one way or the other, has something to do with self-acceptance, right? Try to think of a psychological problem that doesn't involve self-acceptance.
I can't think of one.
I can't think of any either. So self-acceptance seems to be the goal. And so by implication, that means that most people they're not fully self-accepting.
So why do you think that most people are not fully self-accepting? I mean, I am fully self-accepting. I admit to you right now I have a physical disability, plus other problems that go along with that physical disability. My main disability in a nutshell is cerebral palsy, but I'm fully self-accepting of me, and I'm fully at peace with my disability. It took me 30 years, but I'm now finally fully at peace with the traumas that happened in my life, and I'm finally fully at peace with my disability. Why do you think people are so disaccepting of themselves or disenchanted?
Well, obviously, you're not the kind of person that would require my services. But I would say that you're somewhat in the minority. But in other words, look, it's the same. A person doesn't go to a doctor unless they have an illness, right? And a person doesn't go to a counselor or a therapist or a coach unless they have a psychological problem, right? Now, if you're fully self-accepting, you wouldn't need my services in the sense that, and if you weren't sick, you wouldn't go to a doctor. So the people that come to me are people who have this kind of problem, and that's a lot of people. I mean, try to think. At 17, I think 17,000 books with the word happiness in the title. Well, think about how many numbers that comprise. Right? Okay.
Oh, God.
So look, if people were happy, well, then people like me would be out of business.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, they would.
Yeah, they wouldn't need my services,
yes,
you know. Yeah, but I don't deal with people like that. I mean, I praise people. I mean, that's wonderful if you're fully accepted. And that person, I guess, could be of value to anybody. If you're a fully accepting person and a person comes to you for help, I think your counsel would be very, very valued.
Well, now I'm understanding why people with the disability mindset, and I'm sorry to tell you this, but most people with a disability mindset are so downtrodden because they haven't accepted their disability yet. And those of us who are in the minority who have accepted our disability are fairly lucky because, let me tell you, most people who haven't accepted their disability do not have the family support that those of us who have accepted our disabilities do.
Well, have you ever heard of a book called From Death Camp to Existentialism by a very famous psychiatrist?
No, I haven't.
Anyway, he's a very famous man. He even started a whole school of psychotherapy. Anyway, let me describe his experience. Anyway, he was a young man in Auschwitz in Germany, in the death camps. And he decided, so every morning that anybody would wake up, you wouldn't know whether or not it was your last day on earth because they would just gas you to death. So he said, well, he decided that as long as he's going to be in the camps, he has to do something to make life tolerable. And so he decided that he was going to help people. And helping human beings gave his life meaning and purpose. And one of his famous lines is this. He said, look, he said, in the end, despite one's circumstances, one's attitude, we have the freedom to choose. And he lived, for example, a very, very, very sustainable life, and he started a whole school of psychotherapy. So what he's really saying is, in the end, no matter what the circumstances of your life, your attitude is going to make all the difference. And he was a very important figure, and as I say, he started a whole new school. But that makes sense. I mean, it's not much different from, for example, like something like the biblical statement, which is the truth will set you free. Well, I guess another way of saying it is that regardless of the circumstances, what you do in your head will determine how you feel. And I think people have been saying that for thousands of years in one way or the other. That's what I've been saying, but I've been spelling it out in more detail, right? So regardless of the circumstances, you may want to change it, believe it, whatever, but in the end, nobody's in charge of you. You are in charge of you. Now, you're a person who's self-accepting. Apparently, you managed to do that, and that's what people ought to be doing.
Yes, but I'm not kidding when I say that. It took me it took me 30 years altogether, but it took me 2 years to accept that my mom died of a natural meningitis, and that was a blow to my system like there's no tomorrow. And so I think that people should be self-accepting. I mean, we're all beautiful in our skin, but I applaud the work that you're doing trying to get more people self-accepting and get out of the pity mold.
Well, yeah, it requires a little work. In other words, somehow you have to go step by step, In other words, you don't just tell them to accept yourself, but that's not going to work, But you have to ask the kinds of questions that help them to see what they're doing to themselves and why. And once you can get them to disabuse what they've been thinking, then in other words, it's really nothing to do but something to stop doing. It's very much like if I had to say, unhappiness is not something that you have, like the pursuit of happiness is what generally how we talk, but really there's nothing to pursue, there's something to undo. I can make a comparison, something like this. It's like unhappiness is like a person holding their breath. Now, you don't have to teach them to breathe. They already know how to do that because they're holding their breath. What you have to help show them is why are they holding their breath? So there's nothing to do but something to undo. I'm like right now, you and I are talking to each other. I mean, I'm perfectly content where I am. You're perfectly content with you. Well, there's nothing that you should be doing differently, nothing I should be doing differently. I'm not holding my breath. You're not holding your breath. We're not doing anything in our heads to disturb ourselves. Well, suppose that's the way life can be lived.
Well, that would be a wonderful way of living if people were just more accepting of themselves and more accepting of others. And I'm going to tell you from the bottom of my heart, and I sigh before I say this, that teaching about the disabled is one of the hardest jobs I have ever had in my life. And I do it because I do it. But I had a person that I'm actually going back to school for journalism, and one of my teachers did not want to learn about disabilities, did not want to learn what makes me tick, did not want to do anything as far as helping me out. I mean, I don't know. I honestly think, talking to you, that she was not accepting of herself, and yet she didn't want to be accepting of others that are not perfect.
Yes. Well, tell me, You deal with disabled people at all?
I deal with disabled people. I also have a disability. My disability is cerebral palsy.
I see. Well, I think you would agree that ultimately the attitude makes all the difference, correct?
Yes. Oh, yes, it does. Oh, yes, it does. But until you walk that walk, you don't understand. You do not understand how difficult it is to have a mental disability or a physical disability. Let's just throw diabetes in the mix. Until you walk that walk, and let's say you have diabetes, you don't understand how much it takes to get ready in the morning and do the calibrations of your intake of food and just to walk out the door. No, until you walk
right.
that
So then,
walk,
what you do is you would try to help by asking them what you can do to help them. So, but very often the solution to the problem is gotten from the person themselves, you know. So if this is whatever is bothering you, whatever's troubling you, well, you'd want to know how they're thinking and what they're feeling, and maybe you can help them along with that in some way. You can't identify with it because you don't have the illness, but you have you can ask the kinds of questions that can help them alleviate their suffering.
Yeah, but at the same time, they'll say, no, thank you. No, thank you. I don't need help opening the door, right? At the same time, disabled people are so effing stubborn that it's not even funny. We want to be so independent. So at the same time, the empathy and compassion level is not there because they don't want help.
Well, that's true. In other words, if they don't want help, then you shouldn't give it to them. You shouldn't impose yourself on saying, but if they do, be glad to help them out, you know? I mean, for example, I've noticed, for example, when people are disabled, whatever it is, I mean, some people welcome whatever help you can give them, and some people tend to resent it because they feel that they're being treated as if they can't handle themselves. Now, you can't read their minds, but at least you can be sensitive to what they want or what they don't want. I mean, I remember many years ago, for example, in New York, I opened the door for a woman. She wasn't disabled, but she was a very arch feminist. And she was insulted because I opened up the door and I was just being a gentleman. But most people don't look at it that way. I mean, most people hold the door open for you, and I say thank you, and they say thank you. It's a very civilized way of doing things, you know. And some people don't, you know, some people don't. In any case, the point I'm making is that you can't predict everybody's behavior. All you can do is say, well, okay, if you want my help, I'd be glad to help you, and if you don't, I won't.
Yeah, if you want my help, I would be glad to help you, but at the same time, I can't force myself on you.
Precisely. Exactly. I'm not imposing. I'm asking you. In other words, it's not as if I'm saying you ought to do what I want you to do. No, I would do what you want me to do. I mean, I think that's called being civil, isn't it?
Yeah, it's called being civil, but some people just don't want to learn anything outside their own box.
That's true. But you have to remember, like people who come to me have already decided that they need help. So that problem need not bother me. In other words, when somebody walks through my door, they have decided that they want help. They have decided to make an appointment, and so therefore I'm there for that. I mean, I don't impose myself on somebody. Look, it's very much like this. You know, there are people who are alcoholics. And the only way you can help an alcoholic, they have to take the first step. They have to say, I'm an alcoholic and I need help. Unless they do that, nothing you could possibly do can help them.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to take that first step.
Possibly do is you're going to help them. The disabled have to take the first step to accept their disabilities and be self-accepting. And then we can move on and asking for help.
Exactly. And so what you do is you ask questions. I mean, if you made a study of this, if you spent your life studying this kind of phenomenon, well, then you find, okay, what kind of questions can I ask them that would help them alleviate their suffering? And that's what the whole process is about. Now, if I'm correct, if I say that regardless of what the presenting complaint is, and I say, well, if they're all said and done, you're going to find that these people are really unhappy with themselves. And if that is the problem, well, then if you're an expert on that subject, you should be able to help them.
Well, I feel like I'm not an expert on cerebral palsy, but yet I am a lifelong learner. I am still learning. Thank you very much. I am still learning about my own disability, and there are days that it stops me in my tracks, but I still carry on. But I am very self-accepting of the traumas that happened in my life, and I am very, very, very self-accepting for the disability that God has given me, and I'm lucky because I had and still have the family support. And
Yes.
I am only using the system, believe it or not, now because I need help. I need help from the system to get through my schooling. And and I didn't use a disabled program called vocational rehab until I was literally 30 years old. 7 days after my 30th birthday, I got involved with vocational rehab, and that's only because I needed help with my education at the time and still do. And so I never was the one banging on the system ever in my life, and I want to, in 2019, I want to clear my body out of the system so that another person can use the resources that they can't get, that the rehab offers, and I want to leave my happy personality with the rehab, and I want to leave my self-accepting personality with the rehab, so they don't have to drain their resources on me.
Yes. No, I think that's a very wise approach. You know, and it has worked for you, has it?
Yeah, it has. It has. I mean, they were so shocked when I applied to school in March, and I got in, and they were so shocked when I said I have 2 loans, 2 grants, 2 loans, 2 grants, and I'm on FAFSA already set up. So I went in there knowing what I wanted, and also I went in there with a plan of attack so that they didn't have to drain their resources on me, because using the system, you have to be really careful using the system, because you can get into a rabbit hole, as you won't know, Peter, because people will come to use with me, and yet we're draining the system. And it's emotionally exhausting. I'm surprised you're not telling me in this interview I'm emotionally exhausted. I don't know how you stay so positive, and maybe you can give me some tips on that.
What don't you understand about the exhaustion part again, Danielle?
Well, I don't understand how a psychologist doesn't get emotionally exhausted, or how a counselor doesn't get emotionally exhausted, because when I look at people that work with the disabled, they look exhausted.
Well, I think I can tell you how. I think you're raising a very interesting question. I mean, how do professionals who listen to this stuff all day long not become exhausted? Well,
yeah, that's my question.
What? Well, here's how you do it.
That's my question.
Say that again?
That's my question. How
Okay,
do
well, let me answer it for you.
professionals...
Yeah, well, here's what you do. It's called burnout. A lot of people get very burned out after a while, but let me tell you how to avoid that. You see, no matter what you think you know, however skilled you think you have to recognize the fact that you will not succeed all the time. And you have to recognize that as a reality. Now, if you don't succeed, it's because, well, it's the nature of the world. You're never going to be successful in all accounts. But as long as you don't put yourself down for that, and you recognize the reality that not everybody will be helped, and it has nothing to do with the lack of your skill, but there are people who resist for reasons of their own. In other words, it's very much like if I had to give you a silly example, I mean, it's like a person like who is in a contest. Some people become sore losers, and some people become good sports. Now, they both didn't get what they wanted, but what the sore loser does is they take it personally. So if you don't take the outcome personally, well, then you'll be fine. In most cases, things will work out the way you want, but you're not going to make yourself unhappy about the fact that they didn't, but you're not going to put yourself down for it. You recognize the truth. Not everyone can be helped, and that is not your responsibility. All you can do is the best you can. Now, if you accept that, it would be true of any profession. If you were a lawyer or a doctor, you're not going to win every case, so you beat yourself up if you don't win the case. No, you know perfectly well that you're not going to win every case, and that's the nature of the business. Or a physician. You help people who get well, but you're not going to be able to help everybody get well. Are you going to fault yourself for that? I don't think so. If you don't, then there'll be no burnout, and you won't be exhausted.
Yeah. So,
for example, whenever you try to help somebody, when you offer your advice, when you offer advice and you try to help them out, you may notice some people are more receptive than others. Now, their lack of receptivity, is that your responsibility?
No.
Well, so then you're not going to blame yourself, right?
No, and I'm not going to blame myself for teaching a brick wall about cerebral palsy.
Okay,
or at least trying to.
Well, I think we're both on the same page as far as that's concerned. In other words, all you can do is your best, but you can't guarantee the outcome. I mean, nobody can predict the future with certainty, right? I mean, most of the time, the outcome coincides with our expectation, and that's how it's going to happen. But you also have to recognize it's not always going to be that way, and you're not going to argue with the world. I mean, everything you do is really a probability estimate. You think it's going to work out, and very often it does. But when it doesn't, you're not going to say, "I should be able to create an absolute perfect outcome." That would be a very, very strange. That would be a very unhappy person to believe that, and there are people who do things like that.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Some people just have the personality of being miserable. Others have the personality of being happy, and we like the happy people that accept themselves. And there are people like you out there trying to get the world to a better place.
Yeah, as I say, I mean, see, we want to be at peace with ourselves. And as long as we as long as we accept reality, namely that somehow we can only do our best, and sometimes our best is not good enough, but that's not our responsibility, right? As long as so we come back to the question of being at peace with yourself, not putting yourself down. As I say, I think you will agree that all human suffering. I mean, I say all of it, but anybody who even thought about the subject, human suffering is so much of it is self-imposed, and it's self-imposed because people think they believe things about themselves to make them unhappy. Now, if you can help them stop doing that, you will achieve a great deal.
Yeah, exactly. And now, where can people find you? Where can people buy your book? Obviously, I know it's on Amazon. But
it's on Amazon. It's also our universe, Well, anyway, what they can do is, here's what people do. They buy the book, and if they want a more rigorous treatment of some of the things we talked about, And also sometimes people want to talk to me personally. And I do group coaching and I do individual coaching. They could get all that information from the book, you know. In other words, Amazon sells it. I think any bookseller sells it. But also I think iUniverse you can get it also. Okay? Now, I think we finished our interview. I want to tell you how much I appreciate your inviting me. And I had a wonderful time talking to you.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. See, I really get thanks for doing this. I really get thanks for doing this, you guys. And I do it to not only educate you guys, but to educate myself. And in the next couple of weeks, I have two huge announcements for you guys that you've been sitting on pins and needles, actually, for, and waiting to see what my next move is. And then I will, I really get thanks, but I definitely thank Peter for his time, and you guys will hear this episode today, and I hope you guys enjoy the human psychology end of it. It was fascinating. It was fascinating. What Peter and I discussed was absolutely fascinating, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And so people could find you at your website, Peter. Give us your website again, and I'll put it in the show notes.
Well, my website is explainingunhappiness.com.
explainingunhappiness.com, and I will stick it in the show notes for you guys. So please, 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 please share this episode out for those who really need it. It's an episode for those who really need it, even though Peter didn't come on here to necessarily talk to you guys about psychology, but he did. He explained to you guys about why people are so unhappy. And so I like that aspect, and I thank Peter for his incredible insights and his incredible time this morning, and I'm so happy that Peter was willing enough to accept the invitation with me.
Okay. Well, thanks again, and have a good day.
Well, you are so welcome, and I will. Thanks, you guys.
Okay, bye-bye.